Welcome to the last lecture of week 1. In this lecture, we are actually going to discuss a few problems where you are going to get a chance to employ the concepts about the measurement and the energy balance and conversion that you have learned. So basically, we are again going to cover three topics: classification, measurement and accounting of energy, but by solving a couple of problems. Let us begin with the first problem, and a form of this you have already come across. So you can remember when we were discussing about the measurement of energy, we started with a problem and I actually asked you to jot down what are the different forms of energy that you use in your everyday life and whether you can aggregate that or not. Now that we have come across and we already understood that what are the different ways to measure energy and how you can actually convert one energy to different types of energy in one unit, we are going to solve this problem with the help of that. So the problem statement is like this. Suppose there is a household which uses 200 units of electricity, 15 liter of petrol and 14 kg of LPG per month. The question is, what is the total energy consumption of this particular household? Before we jump onto the solution of this problem, let me make you a few things clear. So when you get the electricity bill at the end of the month, you can see that it's written that the units consumed is 100 or the units consumed is 200 and so on. So what does this unit mean? One unit is actually equivalent to 1 kilowatt hour. That is how the electricity bill comes. So this is one of the observations you can make from the next time onward when you get the electricity bill. The second thing that you have to notice, here the consumption of petrol of this household is 15 liter per month. Now 1 liter, we usually take it is equal to 1 kg. So this conversion is 1 to 1. This also we have discussed in our previous lectures. And the third is 14 kg of LPG per month. When you get the LPG cylinder for domestic use, in most of the cases you will see that the weight mentioned there is actually 14 kg. So this is the amount of LPG that you use in the normal cylinder. It's approximately 14 kg. Now we have to do something in order to convert all of them into one unit of measurement. And let us have a look how we are going to do it. This is the table now all of you are familiar with. So this is how we actually converted each fuel in a similar kind of unit. So for each of the fuel, we actually calculated the gross calorific value. Now again, to mention you, this is not the exact calorific value, but this is approximate calorific value or the average calorific value that you can get. So for example, if you take the anthracite coal, it usually has a range, but this is approximately you can take this figure of 7,000 kilocalorie per kg. So if you burn 1 kg of anthracite coal, you are going to get 7,000 kilocalorie of heat. Okay, now see what are the things that we are interested in. So basically, we are interested in petrol. There is a petrol consumption of this household. We are interested in LPG and we are interested in electricity. So since we have the amount of petrol and LPG consumed by the household, we can convert both of them. We can also convert the kilocalorie to kilowatt hour, as we know that 1 kilowatt hour is equivalent to 860 kilocalorie, and then we can add that up with electricity. Or the other way of doing it is that you convert everything to kilocalorie. Now let us have a look at the solution. So the consumption of electricity per month, which is giving as 200 kilowatt hour. The gross calorific value of 1 kg, that is equivalent to 1 liter of petrol, is 11,000 kilocalorie. Now let me again go back to the previous slide. Here you see the calorific value of petrol is 1.1 multiplied by 10 to the power 7 kilocalorie per ton. Now we are actually calculating the calorific value per kg. Therefore it becomes 11,000 kilocalorie per kg or per liter of petrol. So here we are saying that the gross calorific value of 1 liter of petrol is 11,000 kilocalorie. Now this is equivalent to 12.8 kilowatt hour. We are getting this value 11.8 kilowatt hour by dividing 11,000 kilocalorie by 860, because that is the conversion factor between kilocalorie and kilowatt hour. So the petrol consumption, which is equal to 15 liter, is actually equivalent to 15 multiplied by 12.8 kilowatt hour, that is 192 kilowatt hour. So what we have done, we have converted 1 liter of petrol to 192 kilowatt hour equivalent of energy. Similarly, if you take LPG, then you see that the gross calorific value of 1 kg of LPG is 12,000 kilocalorie. In the previous slide, you may also go back and check that the conversion factor was given as 1.2 multiplied by 10 to the power 7 kilocalorie per ton. So this gives us 12,000 kilocalorie per kg. So this is equivalent to 13.95 kilowatt hour. Again, we are getting this value 13.95 as we divide 12,000 by 860. Since the total consumption of LPG is actually 14 kg, therefore we are multiplying 13.95 by 14 to get the total consumption of LPG, which is equivalent to 195 kilowatt hour. Now you see, electricity consumption was already given in terms of kilowatt hour, and now we have converted the use of petrol and LPG both in terms of kilowatt hour. Therefore, the total energy consumption, that according to the information given of this household, is 200, this is coming from electricity, plus 192, this is coming from petrol, and 195, this is coming from LPG, which is equal to 587 kilowatt hour. Now, if we want to convert this 587 kilowatt hour to kilocalorie, we simply need to multiply it by the conversion factor 860, and therefore we get 504820 kilocalorie. So in this example, the household is actually using 587 kilowatt hour of energy or 504820 kilocalorie of energy. This is how you can actually combine different forms of energy measured in different units, add them up and find out what is the total energy consumption. Now this is especially important and especially useful if you want to consume if you want to compare the energy consumption of two different individuals, or if you want to compare the energy consumption, the average energy consumption of two different countries and so on. Let me give you a quick exercise that you can do once we are done with the lecture, and these are the interesting things that can actually encourage you to take a lot more exercise like this. You make an exhaustive list of the different things that you do that require energy, and therefore you list down all kind of energy that you actually need in a day or in a month. So here, as you have seen that we are talking about electricity, petrol and LPG gas, you may think of other forms of energy that you are using in your day-to-day life other than these three types of energy. Make a list and try to convert everything in one unit and see what is your total energy consumption per month. And then you can do very interesting exercises, for example, to see what proportion comes from in the form of electricity, what proportion comes in the form of LPG and so on. Once we do this, let us move to the second problem. This problem is also known to you. This is something we again had discussed when we were talking about the measurement of energy, but this is more specific. This is a more specific example that we are going to deal with. So it goes like this. Suppose an American consumes 1 gallon of petrol for automobile per day. A British also consumes 1 gallon of petrol for automobile per day, whereas an Indian consumes 0.05 liter. And the question is, can you really compare the consumption of petrol for automobile by an American, a British and an Indian individual? So let us try to convert everything to liter. So we know that 1 US gallon is equal to 3.785 liter. So we know now that an American consumes 3.785 liter of petrol per day. If we think about the British, although the information tells you that the British also consumes 1 gallon of petrol, now the UK gallon is different from the US gallon, and this again we had discussed while discussing the measurement, and UK gallon is a little more than US gallon. This is equivalent to 4.546 liter. So essentially, although both the American and the British is said to consume 1 gallon, we can assume that since they are consuming in two different countries, for the American the measurement is in terms of US gallon, whereas the measurement for the British is in terms of UK gallon. So the British actually consumes 4.546 liter, whereas the American consumes 3.785 liter. Now you can compare these two figures with what an average Indian consumes, which is 0.05 liter. And this is actually the real figure for Indian individuals. So what you can see is that the British consumes the highest, the Indian consumes the lowest, and the difference is huge between the consumption of petrol for automobile for these different countries. Another exercise based on this that you can carry out is that you find out the average per capita petrol consumption or diesel consumption for different countries that they are using for the private automobile. And you can try to rank them after converting everything to one unit, maybe in gallon or in liter or in some other unit, and try to see which are the countries who are using highest or who are using kind of more petrol or more diesel for private automobile, and who are the countries who are using less petrol or less diesel for private automobile. And then you can try to link it up with their stage of development. If you understand this one, let us move on to the third problem. This may seem a little more complicated, but this is something which is very interesting. Let us think about this problem. So the carbon content of petrol is approximately 0.64 kilogram of carbon per liter. Let us call this kgC, that is kg carbon per liter. So this is the amount of carbon that is there in the petrol, 1 liter of petrol. Now let us think of a policy. This is, you can call it a climate policy or energy policy. The policy says that there will be a carbon tax imposed in the country. Now what is a carbon tax? Carbon tax in a nutshell is a tax that you pay if your activity leads to emission of carbon dioxide. So as you burn petrol, you are producing carbon dioxide which is going to the atmosphere, and for this activity what you are doing, you are paying a tax. Now the reason will come clear when we deal the issue with regard to energy and climate change in the later modules. But for the time being, let us suppose that there is a carbon tax which is implemented in India, for example, and the magnitude of the tax is 1750, that is 1750 rupees per ton of CO2 emitted. So notice here the carbon content is given in terms of kilogram of carbon, whereas the carbon tax is mentioned in terms of rupees per ton of carbon dioxide. So one is in terms of carbon, whereas the other is in terms of carbon dioxide. Now the question is, what will be the additional amount of money that a consumer of petrol has to pay per liter of petrol once this tax is imposed? Definitely this is going to increase the price of the petrol. In order to solve this problem, you need one more very important piece of information, which is the molecular weights of carbon dioxide as compared to carbon. So the molecular weights of carbon dioxide and carbon are approximately 42 and 12 grams per mole respectively. And this information you will see how we are going to use it. So if you don't understand the technical part of this, in the nutshell what we can say is that if in a mole, there are 12 grams of carbon and there are 44 grams of carbon dioxide. So if the carbon content is 12 gram, then that will lead to 44 gram emission of carbon dioxide if there is complete combustion. However, take this into consideration that the complete combustion actually doesn't take place, but this is a rough estimate that we can always use to carry out this kind of back of the envelope calculations. So let us see what is going to be the price that the consumer has to pay if this kind of a carbon tax is imposed. So the carbon content of the petrol, as we have said, 0.64 kg of carbon per liter. This implies that the CO2 content of petrol per liter is 0.64 multiplied by 44 divided by 12 kg, which is equal to 2.3467 kg per liter. So this information actually tells you if you use 1 liter of petrol, you are likely to emit 2.3467 kg of carbon dioxide. You are likely to emit it. You may emit a different amount depending on the type of combustion, but this is what we are assuming approximately. The next information that we have, that the carbon tax per ton of CO2 is rupees 1750. So if you emit 1 ton of CO2, then you have to pay 1750 rupees. Here you are actually emitting 2.3467 kg. So what will be the cost that you have to pay? So the carbon tax per kg of CO2 will be 1750 divided by 1000, because 1 ton is equal to 1000 kg. Therefore, when you use 1 liter of petrol, as a result you emit 2.3467 kg of carbon dioxide, you have to pay 4.11 rupees. So the additional price that you have to pay because of the imposition of carbon tax for 1 liter of petrol is 4.11. So this is the additional amount that the consumer has to pay. Now, the carbon tax is actually a very, very interesting phenomenon. One can tell you that, see, when you are imposing a carbon tax, essentially there is a burden on the consumer. So there is a lot of debate around this issue. Now the question is why the carbon tax is implemented. The carbon tax is basically implemented because you are emitting something, you are emitting a bad commodity for which you are not making any payment. Again, as I have said, we'll discuss this in the later module. But this leads us to some very important and interesting questions, that whether the carbon tax should be paid by the the user of the petrol or the person who is selling the petrol. It can also lead to a very interesting question that whether it should go to the government and what will government do with this money. So it all depends it all actually depends on the policies that the government is going to adopt with regard to carbon tax. I would like you to encourage to read a little more about carbon tax, what is carbon tax, how it is formulated and so on. And then I would like you to ask another corollary question about, do you think that if the carbon tax is imposed in a country on petrol, will there be a shift of travelers from the private transport to the public transport? Think about it a bit and try to come up with the answer. There is no yes or no answer to it. You can take various assumptions and formulate your scenarios. So these three problems, they more or less actually covered the concept of measurement and conversion. The next problem that we are going to deal with is mainly related to the energy balance table that we have discussed in the previous lecture. This is the fourth problem. It has actually 7 questions, and we'll try to answer the questions one by one. In your reading material, you will find one Excel file which is called Energy Balance India 2013-14P, which is the energy balance table for India that was published in the Energy Statistic 2015, and from there we have taken the provisional energy balance table for the year 2013 and 14. And the questions that follows will actually based on this particular table. I'll show you how it looks like and how you proceed to answer these questions. So one more who publishes this energy balance tables, this is basically the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation of Government of India. So sometimes actually when you are doing empirical research with regard to energy or per se for in any other field, it's very important to know what are the sources of your data, who are the ministries publishing the data, what report contains which kind of information. So this actually eases your research a lot. So as we know, the energy balance is published by the MOSPI, that is Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Let us start with the first question. Or maybe before we start with the first question, let me take you to the energy balance table that I was talking about. So if you open the file called Energy Balance in India 2013-14P, you will find out this kind of a table. So this is the first sheet of the Excel file. This is now quite familiar to you. You will see that in the row, in the column, you actually, in the first column, you find different sectors, which consists of, you must be remembering it, the supply, transformation, and demand of energy. And different columns actually represent different forms of energy. So the pink part is the supply block. This brown row tells you what is the total primary energy supply. Then you have transfer column. You don't, in the row of transfer there is no entry. You have some statistical difference. The green block tells you that this is the conversion where the primary energy is being converted to the secondary energy. And the blue part that you see here, this is basically the demand for energy. Once we have this kind of information, let me just have a look at what the questions that we have to answer. So the first question is there an increase in coal stock maintained in India in the year 2013-14 as compared to the previous year? So the question is, has the coal stock gone up or gone down in the year 2013-14 as compared to the previous year? Now we know that if we need to understand the change in the stock, we have to look at this particular row under supply, which says the stock change. And you see the stock change entry under coal is positive, which means that due to stock change, the supply of coal has gone up. So let me repeat, due to stock change, the supply of coal has gone up. It implies that the stock must have declined. So the stock has declined, the amount of stock that has been declined has been added to supply, and therefore this has a plus sign. So the answer to the first question is that yes, there is the answer is actually no, that there is not an increase in the stock of coal maintained, rather there is a decline in the stock of coal maintained. Let us next go to the second question. What does the figure 221013 kToE in the cell D16 imply? If you look at the cell D16, this is basically this cell that, so this is basically this cell that we are talking about, this 221013. So the question is, what does this figure imply? As we have discussed how you read the conversion part, you see this is the oil product which is being produced. So under the fuel oil product, this value is entered as a plus sign. So this is a secondary form of energy which is being produced in the transformation conversion sector and added to the energy supply of the country. Now, where is it being produced from? It's of course coming from the oil refineries. So this is the output of the oil refinery, which is the oil product. So what is the input fuel? The input fuel, if you look at this oil refineries, what are the components that is being included with a minus sign? Here you can see the minus sign comes with crude oil. So basically it says that 232043 kToE of crude oil is being converted to 221013 kToE of oil product in India in the year 2013-14. So that is the implication of the entry that we have in the cell D16. Coming to the third question, what is the direct coal consumption of the residential sector? Notice we are talking about the direct coal consumption, not the indirect coal consumption. So again, a quick recap, direct coal consumption means the use of coal directly, not in a converted form. So when the household is actually using the electricity, then also it is probably using a part of coal, but not directly, but in an indirectly form. This coal is being converted to electricity, and then this electricity is being used by the household. So now the question is, what is the direct consumption of coal? So maybe let me just see if we can fix this freeze. That will be easier for us. Yes. No, this doesn't quite work. So okay. So coal is actually B. So remember, coal is column B, and let us see what is the use of coal in household. So in this column, you will see that the residential sector, the use of coal by the residential sector is 0. So there is basically no direct coal consumption by the residential sector. Actually, not only the residential sector, you see, other than the industry sector, there is no direct coal consumption, neither in transport nor in other in non-energy sector. So the answer to the third question is the direct coal consumption is basically equal to 0. Coming to the fourth question, what is the amount of natural gas used to produce electricity? So basically, if you come here, let us again go to the conversion, because we are talking about electricity, production of electricity, which is necessarily the conversion activity, and we look at row 4. So the question is, what is the amount of natural gas that is being used to produce electricity? So you see, this is the total amount of electricity that is being produced, 87945 kiloton of oil equivalent. And these are the combination of primary energy that is being used to produce electricity, and the amount of natural gas used is 9055. So you are using 9055 kiloton of natural gas in order to produce some amount of electricity. You can also, now that you know the conversion factors and the measurements, you can also actually convert this 9055 kiloton of natural gas to cubic meter of natural gas, and pose your answer in terms of cubic meter, which is more relevant and readily understandable. Okay, the question itself is there. Can you convert the figure in billion cubic meter? So this is actually a question. You can do it. Coming to the fifth question, this asks you, what is the proportional distribution of final energy consumption among the different sectors? What is the proportional distribution of final energy consumptions among the sectors? Now, what do we understand by economic sectors? These are basically, there are three economic sectors. One is agriculture, the second is industry, and the third is service sector. So in the energy balance, or when you account for energy, there also you will find that there are three major sectors that we are talking about: agriculture, industry, and service. However, sometimes there are subsections or there are subsectors that we consider, and or there are some overlap or some distinction, but here we will see that it's kind of more or less the same. Let us again have a quick look at the demand side, because we are talking about the consumption. Now if you look at the demand side, you see this darkest blue row represents the final consumption. Below that you have industry, you have transport, and you have other, and then you have non-energy use. So by now you know the definition of all of them. So if you are asked to tell what is the composition of the energy demand by different sectors, you have to compare the energy demand by the industry sector with transport sector, with other sectors, and you can also take into consideration the different subsectors that they are talking about. Let us see how we can answer this question. We have derived from this table a smaller table where we have taken the sectors like this: agriculture, forestry, industry. So from other we have actually taken transport, residential, and residual, and there is the total. And we have expressed each of the sectoral consumption as the percentage. You see, and this is again represented in the form of a pie chart. You see that the highest consumption of energy is by the industry sector. That's the highest demand. The second highest is coming from a residual, which is a composition of various things. The third highest is residential, and then you have transport sector. Now notice one thing that you have to notice: this is the energy consumption, this is the total energy consumption, and this does not include the primary energy consumed by the electricity sector. If you separate that out, you will see that there is a very high energy consumption, primary energy consumption, by the power supply sector, but this is not separately accounted for here. Whatever power is being produced, this is again kind of used by any of these sectors. Let us move on to question number 6. So the question 5 was with regard to the composition of demand, and now we are moving on to the composition of supply. And it says what is the mix of primary energy supply in the country. So what are the different fuel that is actually forming the energy supply pool with respect to the primary energy in the country. For that, you have to again move away from the demand part and you have to focus on the first sector, that is the supply sector. So this row number 10 is telling you what is your total primary energy supply, and then you have to actually calculate what proportion is coming from coal, what proportion is coming from crude oil. Oil product is a little tricky because it has a minus sign, and we'll see how we deal with this. What proportion is coming from natural gas and what proportion is coming from electricity. Now remember one thing, this is the mix in the primary energy supply, and this electricity is essentially the primary form of electricity. We are not talking about total primary plus secondary energy supply. Then we have to do a little, we have to do some other manipulation here. So coming here, these are the figures. This is the total primary energy supply, the row that we just had highlighted there. And we are trying to see the percentage of supply. So if you click on this cell, what you get? You basically get this 3,82,355 as a percentage of 6,45,276, which gives you approximately almost 60%. So you can see in your total primary energy supply pool, almost 60% is actually coming from the coal. 35 or almost, so see 36% is coming from crude oil, 1.534% is coming from natural gas. Similarly, a little more than 1% is coming from nuclear, and 1.7 to 1.8% is coming from hydro. You can actually ignore the other electricity because this figure is very small. Similar to your demand, sectoral demand, the distribution of different fuel with respect to primary energy can again be represented with the help of a pie chart. Here there is one thing to observe. You see that this zero is actually representing this particular other electricity, which is very, very small. So it might have some 0.000 something, some positive value, but not in 1 or 2 decimal place. So what are the key things that we can observe when we plot this composition of primary energy supply in India in the year 2013-14? You can clearly see that in the primary energy sources, there is a huge dominance of coal. And this is one of the criticisms that India often faces, that it's highly coal dependent and coal causes a lot of emission in carbon dioxide. However, from the part of India, the argument goes like this: because we have indigenous coal, that kind of enhances our energy security. Energy security is again another topic that we will be discussing in some future module. So this is one of the areas of debate. Should we use coal which is domestically available, or should we shift to some other less emitting fuel which may not be domestically available, or what kind of emphasis should be there on renewable? So these are the current sort of discourse that we are facing at this point. After coal, you see the next reliance is basically on crude oil. So almost 36% is being of the primary energy supply. This is coming from crude oil, and rest of them are quite small in figure. But crude oil, you will see in probably as we talk about the next question, the source of crude oil is actually not domestic. A lot of it is actually imported from other countries. So this is how the energy mix looks like. Let us next move on to the last question, which asks you what is the degree of self-reliance of India with respect to energy supply. Now, the moment we start talking about self-reliance, it basically depends on what is your total consumption or what is your total supply of energy, how much you are producing yourself and how much is coming from outside. So, higher the dependence on import, lower will be your self-reliance. And this actually comes very nicely out of this energy balance table. If you again look at the supply sector, you will see production, this is domestic production, then you have export and import, and then you have total primary energy supply. If you actually calculate what is the percentage of domestic production to your total primary energy supply, that figure is indicative of what is the self-reliance that you have. So if you look at this figure, you see, if you calculate the self-reliance for each individual fuel, you see that the production of coal in India in the year 2013-14 was 2,70,342 kiloton of oil equivalent, whereas the total energy supply, primary energy supply, was 382,355 kiloton of oil equivalent. So 70%, more than 70% of coal that India is actually that is there in the primary energy supply of India, more than 70% more than 70% is actually domestically produced. It's only approximately 30% that India imports. But this 30% is, again, to say it's not a very low proportion to import, because India has a lot of coal, but the quality of coal is such that often India has to import. If you look at the figure for crude oil, that's actually very, very different. The scenario is very different from what you see for coal. So in case of coal, you saw that only 30% is being imported. Here you see more than 80% is being imported by India. So only a little above 16%, or you can say only 17% of crude oil in the primary energy supply is actually domestically produced in India, and rest of it is actually imported. So you see that the self-reliance with respect to crude oil is very, very low with respect to India. Third, if you look at natural gas, in natural gas also the self-reliance is only little over 31%, and rest of it India has to import. So India started emphasizing on natural gas, but the domestic supply has become really limited because the lack of discovery and lack of extraction. So you can see that other than coal, for crude oil and natural gas, the self-reliance in India is very, very low. So for these fuel, India really need to rely on other countries. If you take all these three fuel, coal, crude oil and natural gas together, you will see that the self-reliance is 50%. So out of the total primary energy supply, 50% of the energy is actually domestically produced by India, whereas the rest of the 50% is imported. But one line of caution, when you are talking about this self-reliance, we are essentially not talking about the export or import explicitly. So one idea could be you can modify these numbers by taking into consideration the export and import, because it might also be the case that you are producing a lot, you are importing less, you are importing a lot, but at the same time you are exporting a lot. So although you rely on other countries to import certain kind of fuel, you also supply a lot of fuel in the global market. So that kind of balances the situation. So one point of caution is that when you are actually analyzing these numbers, it's good to come up with some qualitative analysis of the geopolitics, especially when you are talking about energy security and self-reliance. So we will go back to the previous question, because one point that we left there, we said that we will discuss why oil product was not included in the previous analysis. And here also you see, when we are talking about the primary energy supply, we are not talking about oil product. Although if you look at the energy balance table, you see that there is some import and some export of oil product in India, and there is some entry here. So this is basically an entry with negative, which means India exports more oil product as compared to what India imports. But this oil product is not included here because it comes with a negative sign, which makes the whole thing cumbersome. If you come to question number 6, here also you see we have included crude oil, but we have not included oil product in the primary energy supply because it was coming with a negative sign, which may create confusion. The other thing is that this, although this is being included in the primary energy supply, this is basically coming through export and import. So this is not coming through the domestic production. So you only get the figures for import and export, but you don't get any figure for domestic production. Any figure for domestic production for oil product will actually go to the conversion sector. So in a way, this is easier and this is logical if you drop the oil product when you are talking about the mix of primary energy supply. This is where we actually stop, and this is the end of the first week. I hope you enjoyed first week, and I look forward to see you with some new topics in the next week. Thank you.